Now I want to talk about writing large amounts of data to your Arduino. If you want to have a reference table or lots of information to look up, it might be really handy to store it on an SD card. And there's lots of different ways of going about doing that. And you might wonder, like, well, why would I need to write to an SD card? How much data can I really process, or what can I really do with an Arduino? Well, the reality is a lot. I have this great little example here. It's a tiny arcade. And this relies on, I can show you a demo here. This relies on an SD card to store all the games. And yes, this is a fully functioning arcade. Pretty amazing. And if I turn it off here and eject this card, everything is stored on this micro SD card. So in fact, there are a lot of applications where you might want to store vast amounts of data and be able to access it through an Arduino. The Arduino here is really reading the code on the card and managing the audio and the video and everything else. It's a pretty slick little kit. Now, in the past, I've actually done this, and shame on me for doing it, but you could take an SD card and you can wire these male header pins to it and wire it up to your Arduino. There's code online and there's schematics and stuff. And I thought about covering how to do this, but the reality is, as time goes by, these become more and more difficult, and your chances of ruining this card or your Arduino by doing this is probably pretty high. They're 3.3 volt compliant in the way that it's done. The hacky way of doing it relies more on 5 volt, and as the cards get better and faster, you really can't throw 5 volts through this. So I don't recommend doing this anymore, but for nostalgia purposes, I thought I'd show you one. So that's how you do it without having an adapter. Now, speaking of adapters, here's a data logging shield, and this actually has a real-time clock and a few other neat features, but it has a full-size SD card reader. We're not going to use that one today either, because I like this one, which uses micro SD cards. So I can just plug my micro SD card right in there, and it does all the level shifting or converting any 5 volt power from the Arduino into 3.3 volt and very easily writes to an SD card. So let's take a look at a couple examples. First of all, we're going to hook this up, and it's hooked up through what's called SPI, which is a type of communication protocol, and it requires a few wires here. So if I look at this, I have one is my chip select, I have my in, I have out, I have a clock, and then I have ground. I can go ahead and hook that one up. Let me unplug my Arduino. Oh, it's unplugged. I'll go ahead and put my ground in, and I'll go ahead and connect my 5 volt. Now the rest of the wires here, these 4 that I need, I'm going to go ahead and take a look at the code, because in your Arduino IDE, you should have some built-in examples for writing to SD cards. And if you don't, there is a library. You install them just like you would any other library. Go to Include Library, Manage Libraries, and search for SD. Now if I go into Examples, it's not in the built-in right here, but underneath it says Examples for any board. There's an SD. And the first one we're going to look at is CardInfo. And I've already got it open here. And I'm going to look at the code right here. And in is right here. That connects to pin 11. That's what I love about Arduino. It's CS, or chip select, uses pin 4. The comments, right? These built-in libraries and codes, so many of them are so well commented that it's like I don't even need a tutorial. Here's my out, so that's pin 12. The board's labeled here. Here is clock. Let's see, CLK, pin 13. Oh, I just pulled it out. That's not going to work well. So let's go ahead and plug the Arduino in, and let's verify the code. Let's click on Tools, Board, Write Port. Perfect. Let's upload it. And let's open up the serial monitor to see what happens. I just access the card, and there is all the information about the card. Most of it at this point is useless. What I really want to know is that it can actually read to it, and volume type FAT32. And that is important to note because typically you want to format your cards as FAT16 or FAT32. You can use them unformatted and it will work with other formats, but if you really want to have no issues and know it's going to work, just format it as a FAT16, FAT32. You can do that on a PC, Mac, or Linux machine. It's usually your disk utility program. I think most of you have already done that. It tells you the amount of space that's on here. It tells you the files that are on here. Pretty straightforward. Now let's go ahead and do the example SD read and write. And what this does, you can see a little bit of a truncated how-to here, but the pins are all the same. And we will upload this code and take a quick look at it. Okay, it's uploading. Done. Let's open up the serial monitor. And it says initializing SD. It initialized it. It wrote a file called test.txt. And it wrote this data to that text file. So pretty cool. It wrote data and it read back from the data. And if you look at the code, it's pretty straightforward. There's a library for SD cards, so that's why the code is so straightforward. All the nasty, difficult, complicated things happen in the background. So if we look at the setup, we basically have serial communication set up there. We have the printing to let us know that the initialization happened, everything else, some error code in there. And in this particular file, in the loop, nothing happens. Why? Because I don't want to read the card, write to the card, read to the card, write to the card, right? That's what would happen in the loop. It would be a never-ending nightmare. So we're doing it all within the void setup. And basically, if you really sit down and take a look at all this, you're writing to the screen, writing text, but then you're actually writing the files, closing the files, and then right down here, opening the files and printing what it sees. So if your project needs vast amounts of data or lookup tables or additional lines of text that you're using for pushing something out to the internet, using an SD card might be the best solution for storing all of that data with your Arduino.